In the middle of the 2010s, a 1-pound package could leave a warehouse on the edge of Beijing, cross the Pacific, clear an American airport, and land on a stoop in Queens for less money than the same box mailed from Manhattan to a suburb in New Jersey. Shoppers noticed first. A phone case from Shenzhen arrived with a tracking number and a shipping line that looked like a typo. A nearly identical case sent from Brooklyn cost more than the object inside. The listing did not apologize. It did not need to. The cart still converted. Letter carriers noticed next. The inbound stream from East Asia thickened into a second river of mail. Polybacks, bubble mailers, tiny motors, false lashes, LED strips, charging cables, costume jewelry, plastic fittings that existed only because the postage was cheaper than the plastic. The origin marks said China Post, sometimes Hong Kong Post, sometimes a third Asian operator. The last mile was always the same American walk, up the same American stairs to a door that had ordered something for less than a domestic stamp run would have allowed. The inversion felt like a software error. Distance had flipped. A parcel that traveled 8,000 miles undercut a parcel that traveled 30. Geography, the oldest fact in logistics, had been priced as if it no longer applied. It was not an error. It was a rate. The rate sat inside an international treaty older than the incandescent bulb, administered by a United Nations agency most Americans have never named, and applied to a country still sorted, on paper, as if it were still catching up. The United States Postal Service had to finish the delivery. The originating post paid a fee that did not cover the walk. The gap sat on an American ledger, year after year, while storefronts on the other side of the ocean learned they could sell into the richest consumer market on Earth without paying American postage. This is not a story about briefcases of cash. It is a story about a classification, a schedule, and a 145-year-old postal union that priced Beijing below New Jersey. The machine that produced that inversion was built for a different century. In 1874, postal officials from 22 countries met in Bern, Switzerland, and signed the Treaty of Bern. They created the General Postal Union, soon renamed the Universal Postal Union. The idea was almost tender. A letter should move across borders as if the world were a single territory. Each administration would collect postage from its own senders and, for a long time, deliver what arrived from abroad without charging the foreign post a serious settling fee. The system assumed roughly balanced flows. Britain wrote to France, France wrote back. That assumption died slowly, then all at once. After the Tokyo Congress of 1969, the Union adopted terminal dues, a transfer payment from the origin post to the destination post for the physical work of delivery. The principle sounded fair. If more mail flowed one way than the other, the receiving country should be paid for the extra walking, sorting, and fuel. In practice, the dues were not market prices. They were negotiated averages, grouped by country class, designed to protect poorer administrations that could not charge industrial rates and still remain in the network. By the early 21st century, the Union still sorted its members into development groups using per capita income and postal indicators that moved far more slowly than factories. China remained in a lower group long after it had become the workshop of the planet, and after joining the World Trade Organization in 2001, the central node of physical e-commerce. The classification was not a conspiracy hatched in a back room in Beijing. It was a bureaucratic remainder. A country that still had poor provinces on a formula sheet kept the discount even as coastal megacities filled containers with goods aimed at American credit cards. The product that detonated the formula was the small packet, generally under 2 kilograms, the weight class of a blouse, a charger, a toy, a replacement part. In the letter era, that class was a trickle. After about 2010, it became a flood, because a new kind of seller had appeared. Not a ministry, not a catalog house, but a merchant with a phone, a factory contact, and a storefront on AliExpress, Wish, DHgate, or 1,000 nameless shops riding the same pipes. Around 2011 through 2014, China Post and the Postal Service built a tracked, lightweight product, later known to shoppers as e-packet. Tracking made the gamble feel safe. The terminal dues math made it cheap. What most people missed was the jurisdiction. This was not a customs tariff and not a Commerce Department dumping case. It was a postal settlement inside a specialized United Nations agency headquartered in Bern, with 192 member countries and a culture that prized universality over cost causality. A rate book written to keep rural posts in Africa and Asia connected to the world was now being used legally to land a phone case in Ohio. The American domestic network still had to meet service standards, pay unions, fuel trucks, and walk the last block. The inbound item did not pay that full cost. The gap was not theoretical. Inspectors, the Postal Regulatory Commission, and later the White House would put numbers on it.
For a decade, though, the gap was simply the way the world was priced, and the public experienced it as a miracle of cheap stuff, rather than as a treaty artifact. So the contradiction from the doorstep had an address, not a smuggler, a schedule in Bern, an outdated group label, a dues formula that still imagined letters between equals, while packets from one industrial coast buried another. Follow the incentives, and the system stops looking mysterious. The merchant in Yiwu or Guangzhou is not thinking about 19th century diplomats. He is thinking about a listing price. If the landed cost in Dallas can undercut a seller in Dallas, the algorithm rewards him. Platforms built entire catalogs on that arithmetic. Wish turned disposable goods into a feed. AliExpress taught American buyers that a 2-week wait was a coupon. Independent sellers learned the same lesson without a brand. Manufacture, bag, induct into China Post, disappear into the inbound stream. China Post and the broader Chinese postal complex had a national reason to keep the channel open. Outbound packets were an export service dressed as mail. Volume justified facilities, aviation contracts, and a claim to modern logistics prestige. The originating administration collected postage from the seller at a local price and settled with the destination post at the treaty rate. When the treaty rate was low, the spread could be commercial oxygen. Hong Kong Post and other regional operators became alternate doors when one lane congested, which is why a package that began its life on the mainland sometimes wore another city's label by the time it reached an American plant. The Postal Service sat on the other end of the walk. Its legal duty was universal service inside the United States. Its international duty, as a member of the Union, was to accept and deliver what the treaty defined as mail. Those two duties collided in the small packet boom. Every inbound item consumed sortation capacity, fuel, and a carrier's minutes. The remuneration arriving from abroad did not match the domestic cost model used for a priority mailbox or even a cheap first-class parcel. Postal leadership, including Postmaster General Megan Brennan in the later 2010s, could complain in testimony and in negotiations. It could not, alone, rewrite a multilateral rate. In Bern, the Union staff and its Director General, Bishar A. Hussein, inhabited a different psychology. Keep every flag inside the network. Universality was the sacred word. A rich country threatening to charge real costs sounded, to many delegations, like a breach of the original bargain. Developing country administrations, China among them on the formula sheet, argued that higher dues would isolate their senders and violate the spirit of 1874. American negotiators at the State Department and the Postal Service heard something else, a rule that no longer described the country that was using it. No one in this chain needed a secret handshake. The merchant wanted conversion. The origin post wanted volume. The destination post wanted cost coverage. The union wanted membership. Those motives, stacked, produced a transfer that looked, from an Ohio porch, like a gift. The wound opens in public on October 17, 2018. The White House announces that the United States will withdraw from the Universal Postal Union. The notice starts a 1-year clock. If nothing changes, the oldest continuously operating international organization in the communications world loses its largest destination market, and the quiet fiction that mail is one territory begins to tear. The stated grievance is terminal dues on inbound packets from China and other low-group senders. Administration officials, including the United States Trade Representative and postal negotiators, argue that American households are, in effect, finishing Chinese orders at a loss. Contemporary reporting puts the annual hit in a range that recurs in official and journalistic estimates, roughly $170 million to $300 million a year, enough to matter on a postal income statement already strained by pension accounting and declining first-class letters,
not enough to be a cartoon of national collapse. The precise figure depends on cost models, mix of items, and which year is measured. The direction does not. The destination operator is delivering below cost. The origin merchant keeps the margin.
Beijing does not treat the notice as a technical filing. Chinese officials and China Post warn that unilateral withdrawal will scramble not only e-commerce, but letters, legal papers, and the small traffic that still binds families. In Bern, member states hear a threat to universality. Smaller countries fear a precedent. If Washington can walk when a rate hurts, anyone can. Private integrators watch with interest. If the postal channel becomes expensive or chaotic, UPS, FedEx, and DHL stand to pick up weight they were never meant to carry at letterbox prices, and some of the miracle listings will simply vanish. Through the winter and spring, the United States does not quietly let the clock run out. It uses the clock. Negotiators tell the Union there are two futures. In one, the United States remains and gains the right to self-declare rates for inbound bulky letters and small packets, the e-format traffic that e-commerce actually uses. In the other, American docks and plants begin treating much of that stream as cargo outside the old settlement, with rates the Postal Service sets itself and with no obligation to lose money on a polybag. European administrations, which have also watched Asian packets fill their networks, are not united, but they are no longer reciting 1969 as scripture. The commercial distortion has become visible in their plants too. September 2019, an extraordinary Congress convenes in Geneva, not a routine four-year gathering, but an emergency session forced by the withdrawal letter. Delegates fill a hall that usually handles incremental amendments. The American position is blunt. Self-declaration for the packet formats that exploded after 2010 on a short runway, or the United States leaves. China and allies press for a slower glide path, for recognition that developing is still a legal category, for protection of exporters who built businesses on the old schedule. African and other low-volume members fear they will be collateral, paying more to reach America because a Sino-American fight rewrote the book. The compromise that emerges is not poetry. The Union agrees to let the United States, and then other destination countries on a timetable, self-declare remuneration for inbound e-format items, with a transition that begins in 2020 rather than in some distant Congress.
Caps, notification rules, and a wider reform of the dues system are bargained in the margins so that the vote can be described as multilateral rather than as a surrender. Washington, having come to the brink of walking out of a 145-year treaty, accepts the package and rescinds the withdrawal. The network stays formally intact. The discount that made a Pacific crossing cheaper than a Hudson crossing is scheduled to shrink. It does not heal cleanly. Implementation is a crawl of notices, rate annexes, and operational exceptions. Merchants reroute. Some volume shifts to private air cargo and to the de minimis customs threshold, a different loophole with a different statute, because cheap goods hunt for the next gap as soon as one closes. China remains an industrial giant, still arguing parts of its postal identity in development language. The Postal Service still walks the last mile, still posts losses in other columns, and still cannot by itself police what a foreign warehouse chooses to induct as mail. American buyers, for a while, keep clicking. The listings do not carry a footnote that says a treaty fight in Geneva just repriced their charger. And something larger has been revealed, which is why the climax refuses a tidy bow. A president can threaten to leave, a Congress can be called, a rate can be self-declared. The underlying design still privileges universality and classification over observed cost, and it still sits largely outside ordinary trade law. The next distortion will not need a villain. It will need only a formula that froze while the cargo changed. In the plants, the bags keep coming. Fewer of them ride the old miracle price. Enough of them remain to prove the channel was never only about stamps.
The deeper mechanism is not a plot against a post office. It is what happens when a legal label outlives the thing it names. Developing nation on a postal worksheet is a humanitarian courtesy that became a commercial input. Once the input was priced into millions of listings, an entire export culture organized around it. Changing the label then felt, to those who had built on it, like theft, and to those who had paid for it, like overdue arithmetic. That is the quiet mystery shape of the story. Familiar life, a cheap object on a porch. Underneath, an 1874 Union,
a 1969 settlement idea, a country group, a packet format, a withdrawal letter, a hall in Geneva. No suitcase of cash moved from a treasury in Washington to a cellar in Guangdong. The transfer happened because an American carrier was obliged to complete a foreign contract at a treaty price. The title means that and only that. Stretch it into a fable of secret control, and you lose the actual scandal, which is more ordinary and more durable. Systems keep running on last century's categories until a crisis makes the category expensive enough to reopen.
Look around, and the same grammar appears in other rooms this channel walks. A grandfathered license, a customs threshold written for envelopes, a data rule that assumed libraries, not brokers, an infrastructure standard that assumed letters, not lithium batteries in polybags. Each one is defensible at birth. Each one, unrevised, becomes a private advantage for whoever can read the schedule and ship into the gap. The porch in New Jersey is quiet again, in a different way now. Some of the miracle listings have risen in price or vanished into slower cargo. Some never needed the old dues. They needed only a buyer who thought postage was a force of nature. The Union still sits in Bern. Member flags still pretend the world is one territory. The worksheet still has groups. The cargo still changes faster than the groups. If a classification can reroute an ocean of goods without most of the recipients ever hearing the agency's name, what other everyday price is still being set by a room that has not updated its map?